This is episode 50 with Danielle Watson.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 50 today, and I'm super excited to be speaking to none other than Danielle Watson. Now, Danielle is an author and TEDx speaker who combined her qualifications in archaeology with her personal interests to create a unique personality assessment tool. Using what she called the PERS process, Danielle was able to analyze and categorize women's personalities based on the contents of their handbags. But the tool also extends to things like phone apps, backpacks, wallets, and everything else like that. Then, 48 hours before she was due to give her TEDx talk, she came home to divorce papers stuck to her door. Rather than letting it stop her, Danielle turned that experience into a time of self-love and subsequently wrote a book sharing daily affirmations for others going through the same sort of thing. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn how to combine your education with your personal interests, how to listen to your gut and reinvent yourself, 2 ways to tell if you're on the right track, how to turn personal quirks into professional assets, and how to use your qualifications in an unconventional way. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/050. But for now, let's go hang out with Danielle. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Danielle Watson. Danielle, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be speaking to you. Our mutual friend Zephan, who I interviewed in an earlier episode, put us in touch, and I checked out what you're up to, and it's super cool. Not only how you've turned your personal story into something to help others, but the product or sort of method that you created, which we'll get into. But for people who don't know who you are and are listening, why don't you tell us a bit about your quarter life story?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness, I love the concept of this show and sharing, what we wish we had known sort of back in the day, we would call it here in the US. And I think back on my story and how there were so many things that I did and decisions that I made that seemed to make no sense at the time. But looking back, I can see how all of those little dots connected and how all those small decisions led me to where I am today. And I so wish that I had someone back then telling me that it makes sense to follow your gut and it makes sense to do the things that feel good to you. But at the time, I felt like I was very much a trailblazer, sort of following my heart, doing the things that I wanted to do. So back when I was at university, back when I was in college, I decided to study anthropology and archaeology. And Brian, if you include any kind of picture of me with the show, our listeners will be able to see that I'm very much a feminine female. I'm very much a girly girl. And so sitting in these anthropology and archaeology classes with a bunch of like construction worker looking dudes, it was clear to everyone that I didn't really belong there, that I was sort of the outlier. And it was kind of confusing as to why I would be taking this class when clearly I wasn't interested in getting a shovel and going out into the desert and digging things up. But it's funny because the subject matter of archaeology and anthropology just fascinated me. And I know many people around the world find archaeology fascinating and our human history fascinating. And I just wanted to be there so much because I just found it so interesting. And so when I graduated, I got hit with the reality of, oh my goodness, I've just spent years and tens of thousands of dollars studying something that I don't actually want to do. And what am I going to do? And I went through many years of not actually knowing what I was going to do with that, but just feeling mostly good that I'd followed my heart, but also sort of wondering if all the people who told me I was crazy for doing something like that had been right. And I had just been completely naive and, not understood how the world works. But about I would say about 10 years after I finished graduate school, I had built a business at that point, and I was feeling that sort of angst inside that many of us feel when we're ready to make a change. And I started looking around at, what are the skills that I had acquired since college, since I'd left graduate school, and what were the things that I was most interested in when I was studying. And by a series of events, I ended up creating something called the purse process, where I took the skills of an archaeologist and I started excavating women's handbags, looking for what they believed about themselves, what they believed about the world. And it just became this worldwide phenomenon that led to me giving a TEDx talk about how every single person has skills and knowledge that could be used in an unconventional way, and how I had applied my skill set that I had spent a lot of time acquiring in a really unconventional way. And I never could have known any of that was going to happen or planned for it. But looking back now, it all makes sense.
Yeah, there's so many directions I could go, yeah. And for people who are listening, I don't know if I'll put a picture, but I'm definitely going to link your TED talk, or TEDx talk, so you'll see the girl in the little red dress, and you'll see exactly what Danielle is talking about, being an outlier in archaeology class. You said you'd built a business up over 10 years. Was that in sort of traditional archaeology?
No, it's interesting. I actually never worked in the field of archaeology because the day I left school, I just knew that there really wasn't anything that was available to me that I was interested in doing. And so it was sort of that crisis moment of, oh my goodness, what did I just do? Like, what did I just spend all this time doing? And I fell into a state of depression, really. At the same time, I had grown up on the West Coast of the United States. I grew up in California, and I was moving to the East Coast of the United States. And those are like two different planets in a way. So I was, for the very first time in my life, no longer in school, where I no longer had, hoops to jump through and achievements to make and reasons to feel good at myself. I was recognizing that I'd acquired a skill set that I didn't have any real prospect of using because it meant that I would have to do things that I didn't want to do. And I was moving to what felt like, in some ways, a foreign country. And so what I did was I turned to something that I had started doing in graduate school to keep myself from spontaneously combusting from stress, because I worked and I went to school full time and I did so many things. So my first business was, I had a mobile yoga studio. I fell back on my yoga practice. That was something that I did to relieve stress and to keep me centered. And I just was like, this is something that I enjoy doing. I was doing it all the time. I got certified to teach. And then I quickly recognized, like probably many of our listeners, that heck, I wasn't making a whole lot of money doing this. And there were other ways I could do that. So I struck out on my own, and I created this mobile yoga studio business. And I did that for nearly 10 years before I created the purse process. And I would say probably about 3 years before I created it was when I started feeling that feeling of, I've done everything I can do here. And I feel that the draw that there's something more that I'm meant to do. And I just didn't know what it was. And so I just started looking around for opportunities to explore myself, to understand myself more deeply, to have new experiences so that I could figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love, I'm already picking up a recurring theme where like you kind of explored things you were interested in, even if you had no idea how those would work out or become a career. So that's really cool. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about that as we go. And especially the fact that it was 10 years after you graduated. It's probably 5 years now since I graduated from my civil engineering degree. So also in the sort of builder-esque qualifications. But yeah, I love how you, even after all that time, looked back and thought, like, how can I use my skills and my interests in something kind of that no one's ever done before? So
Yes.
that's really cool. And
There's some
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add a little bit more to that. So there's a little part of the story that I didn't share. So even though I was intentionally looking back at how the skills I had acquired and the interest I had might serve me in creating a different business, I was so in the thick of what it was that I was doing. It was what I had, the skills I had acquired were so natural to me and so highly developed that I didn't even know I was already using them all the time. And it actually took somebody else looking from the outside in to notice that my ability to do this was actually extraordinary.
Mm,
And the way it happened was I was speaking with somebody on the phone about how I would recognize what we call in the entrepreneurial world my avatar or my ideal client.
mhm,
And I didn't have an answer to that question, and I was very frustrated and annoyed by that question because my thought was, well, if I knew that, I'd be doing something with it. I'm talking to you trying to figure that out. And so I gave a very flippant answer and I said, well, I could look through her purse because I know everything about a woman by looking through her purse. And instead of just laughing me off and saying, haha, that's so funny, she was like, well, what do you mean by that? And that was the moment where the purse process was born and where I finally became conscious of the fact that my ability to extrapolate information about people's behaviors and values and beliefs from their artifacts or the articles that they carry with them was an extraordinary ability.
mhm. I love that you mentioned that. There's a cool video that I've shared before, and it talks about like how sometimes some of our greatest strengths are things that we just think are normal or like everybody could do. Um, for example, I'm really organized and structured and kind of half robot. Um, and I just think like, well, everyone keeps a Google Calendar with what they have to do on it. Um, and then it takes like my girlfriend or someone to say like, no, Brian, you're actually like good at that stuff. So I'm really glad you mentioned that for people listening. Like sometimes things that you think everybody can just do are some of your greatest strengths.
It's
So
so
that's really
true.
cool. And you mentioned, I think it was via email when we were chatting to set up this interview, that creating the purse process required you to kind of reinvent yourself and trust your gut. What is that? What does that actually feel like for people listening? And could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so it did. It required me to trust my gut because there were so many things that I needed to learn about myself and how to do a different kind of business, and it required me to stretch myself. And there are two ways that I can kind of hone into whether I'm on the right track or not. So one is, do I feel enthusiasm for something? And when I look back over my life, the best decisions I've made, even allowing myself to major in anthropology and archaeology, I felt so much enthusiasm. So when you feel that enthusiasm, that desire to do something, I really feel like that is that inner part of you just calling out to you saying, go this way, follow this path, do this thing, acquire this skill, learn this knowledge, whatever it is. I feel like that is such a wonderful sign from our gut saying, this is the right path. You may not understand where it falls in the big picture, but this is the right path. And then the other thing, especially when I first started the purse process, what I did was I actually went on tour. I actually had no plan except for some plane tickets, and I got on a plane and I would go to different cities in the US and just find places where people were gathered, networking events and things, and I would just show up and I would just tell people about what I did. And the sign to me that was a good thing to do was it terrified me because it meant I was going to have to grow and to put my big girl panties on and be a bigger person than I was, because I was terrified of traveling on my own. I had never gone anywhere on my own. And here I was going to go around the country on my own. I was going to be sharing about a business that I was just starting. I was going to be meeting people I don't know. I'm an introvert, so I was going to have to be introducing myself to people. And I knew I was going to only be in these places for a limited amount of time. So I was going to have to say yes to the opportunities that were presented to me without taking a lot of time to think about, whether I actually was afraid or not, and to just do them. So for me, enthusiasm is a big sign that I am following that inner call or I'm listening to my gut. and then doing things that terrify me, not because they are truly unsafe, but because they are asking me to stretch and grow myself. Those let me know, hey, this is the right direction.
I love it. So I think people are dying to find out the purse process, and we call it not we, you called it the purse process, but really this can apply to backpacks and wallets, and even, I'm guessing, phone apps and people's homes and all sorts of stuff, guys and girls. So what the heck is the purse process? And I seen you said, how to turn personal quirks into high value professional assets. It's like, what is it? How does it work? What does it look like?
Yeah. So what it is, it's taking 3 basic skills that every beginning archaeology student learns. And I decided to apply them to a small niche, which was purses for me. And so what I did was I started researching the contents of women's handbags, and I noticed that there were patterns that show up. So just like when an archaeologist finds a collection of items out in the desert, by looking through them, you can tell what group of people they belong to and sort of how their society ran and what they valued and what they believed. And I was able to correlate that to how women collect things in their handbags. And like you said, Brian, this applies to anything. It could apply I could read the apps on your phone. I could look through, what is in your car, or your backpack, or your briefcase. I just branded myself as the purse archaeologist because it was so fitting for my personality and interest. But the methodology that I use it's really universal. So as I was collecting the knowledge and I was doing the research, like I said, I noticed there were patterns, and I thought, I need other people to be able to see what it is I'm seeing here, because I'm actually looking a little bit like a swami or like a purse psychic or something. And I'm never going to be credible until I can prove that there is a methodology and a science behind this. And so I developed these 4 what I called purse process personalities, or archetypes. And I gave them fun names like Dumpster Debbie and Vanishing Veronica and Absent Abigail, just based on patterns that I saw. And when I did that, women started being able to recognize themselves by looking at what it was they carried with them and how that pointed to how they make decisions and what they believe about the world. So it was just this incredible taking of something that is so ancient and so dusty and usually applied to, people that are no longer living. And I modernized it by applying it instead of to groups of people, rather to individuals, and with their modern living collection that is constantly evolving and changing. And I made it so that people could self-identify rather than needing a professional to kind of come in from the outside and tell them about themselves.
It's so smart, and this is so cool. And like, how then would someone turn, like if someone is listening to this, and I'll link up the purse process in the show notes, but how then would you turn personal quirks into, like I said, those high value professional assets?
Yes. So that part, thank you for reminding me of that second part. So turning your personal quirk into high value professional assets means looking at the parts of you that don't necessarily add up and juxtaposing them against one another to create something new and fresh. So archaeology is not new, and being a girly girl is not new, but you put those things together and it creates this amazing sort of pop. So I encourage people to look at their skills and their interests and the things that don't quite go together. I have another wonderful example beyond myself. So I have a friend, John, and I talked about him in my TEDx talk, John Harrison. He loves video games, but he works in the corporate world, and he created a system where he uses video games and people's enjoyment of them to help people develop their professional career. And I don't entirely 100% understand how he does it, because personally I've never worked in the corporate sphere, but he helps them to develop things like speaking and marketing and management skills. And he he just took two things that don't go together, boring corporate development and video games, and he juxtaposed them against each other and created this amazing methodology and brand. And I believe anyone can do that. I believe that taking things about ourselves that we may even be embarrassed about and bringing them forward are really what makes us unique. And what makes us unique is what makes us high value.
You can go tweet that right now if you're listening to this. It reminds me of Steve Cam of Nerd Fitness too. Like there were so many fitness blogs and personal trainers online, and he took like his love of nerdy stuff and comics and built a community around that, which is huge now. And I think you kind of answered, I was going to ask you how we can start using our sort of traditional qualifications in an unconventional way, but I think you just hit that nail on the head. It's like, start looking at how you can combine your interests in a way that no one's doing it.
Yes, looking at how you can combine them. And also another tip is look at changing the context. So me trying to be a feminine girly girl in the field of archaeology, that would have just made me a nuisance to people. But because I took those skills and those two attributes of myself and I moved them to a different sandbox, we'll say, I moved them to the context of personal development, that's what made it exciting, new, and interesting.
Yeah, something that just popped up for me right now as you were explaining that is, I think a big reason, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is way more possible than people think in combining interests in a new way. But I think a big thing that stops a lot of people is worrying what other people will think. Did you face a lot of that in your journey?
You know, I, from a very young age, had this sense of, what do I want to call it? Self-assurance, almost bordering on arrogance, I would say. So when I decided I wanted to do something, including this, I didn't worry a whole lot about what other people would think until they started thinking that they liked it. And then I took it as a compliment. So yes, I did have the thought, what will other people think? But it wasn't so much like who's going to let me. It was more a defiance of who's going to stop me. Who is going to stop me from doing this? There are no archaeology police out there. I am going to do this, and the proof of it will be, does it catch on or not? Can I build something out of this? Not, do people think this is crazy? And there certainly were people. I remember I did go into a networking event one time, and it was all men and me. And when I told them what I did, now most men react, wow, that's amazing. I can see how that works. And my wife or my girlfriend, this and that, and that's such a cool concept. But in this particular room, one of the men just outright laughed at me, And, it didn't feel very good, but I didn't let it stop me because I had already at that point had so many people affirm that they thought this was creative and amazing. And I had been paid large sums of money. So I knew that although he found it amusing, it was working for me.
Exactly. I love it. You mentioned the 4 types of personalities. Could we quickly go through what those are? Like just kind of a sentence about each one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is the dumpster Debbie, which everybody recognizes immediately. We know it's that woman who carries the giant purse that has everything with the kitchen sink in it. And we love her because she always takes care of us. But one of the things that really holds her back is she's just overwhelmed. She's just trying to do too much. And there's so much more I could say about that, but we'll keep it brief. So the vanishing Veronica process personality archetype is somebody who carries usually a black or a brown handbag. It's very nondescript, but the things inside of it are beautiful or carefully chosen. So this is a woman who I liken to the Clark Kent Superman sort of thing. She likes to pass as normal, but inside she's amazing and incredible and has so many skills. But what sort of gets her is that she doesn't want anybody to see all that she's capable of because it doesn't feel safe to let people know that she can do so many things. This is my favorite sort of personality to work with. The absent Abigail archetype is somebody who, usually when I meet her out in public, she likes to walk up to me and say, "Well, your methodology is not valid because I don't carry a purse." And I like to tell her, "Actually, I have already included you in my first process personality archetype. So an absent Abigail often doesn't carry a purse at all, or she carries something minimal with just the very basics in it." And one of the wonderful attributes of this woman is that she's highly efficient. She can do more than anybody else. But what gets in her way is that she often ends up getting treated like a robot and like she doesn't have feelings or needs or dreams. And then the fourth process personality archetype is perfect Priscilla. And this is another easy one to recognize because she's the lady with the design, always has the designer handbag and the matching wallet, and everything's so perfect and matchy. And her wonderful quality is that she is fierce and that she will protect the people that she works with. And she very much needs everything to be of the highest quality. So you can count on her for having things done the right way every time. But the limitation is that she often seems closed off, and people feel like she's so above them that they can't connect with and communicate with her. And so often she ends up lonely.
I got it. I really love for people listening to this to shoot us a tweet and tell us like what personality type that they kind of resonate with or explain to them best.
I would love that. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So Danielle, I do want to shift gears a little bit and kind of head back to your personal story. I know we shared some highlights earlier on, but there were some big personal struggles that you faced. If you don't mind, would you mind sharing some of those with us?
Not at all. I don't mind at all. So, so far we've talked about all the highlights. We've talked about all the wonderful accomplishments that I've made and all of the exciting adventures that I've had. I created this business and I did it, and I had a TED Talk and I traveled around. It was amazing. And I got to wear beautiful red dresses and meet incredible people and build all this stuff. And what we haven't talked about is, the low point, which 48 hours before I was to step on stage to give my TEDx talk, I received divorce papers taped to my front door. And so in the midst of all this amazing, incredible achievement in my professional life, my personal life was crumbling. It was absolutely crumbling. And despite my best efforts, I couldn't save it. And so at a very inopportune moment, I received divorce papers, and it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating to be having sort of what felt like the apex of my life, giving a TED Talk, coincide with what felt like the very lowest of the low moment, finding divorce papers. I mean, what is worse than that? I'm sure there are worse things, but for me, I hadn't experienced anything worse than that. And emotionally, you can imagine, I was feeling the full range of emotions: anger, sadness, depression, fear, also, but at the same time, excitement that I had earned this amazing opportunity and I wanted to do it. So in the moment that happened, I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice to either crawl in bed and cry for the foreseeable future, and no one would have blamed me for doing that because it was a devastating, heartbreaking moment. Or I could screw up my courage and find some way to recover from that moment and still get up on stage and still deliver my talk. And so when I first found the papers, the first thing I did was rip them off the door and take them inside and wonder if the neighbors had seen. But then I decided, okay, I'm just going to sleep on this. I'm not going to call my mom. I'm not going to tell anybody on Facebook. I'm not going to do anything. I heard my mom's voice in the back of my head saying everything will look better in the morning. I know many of our moms have said that to us, things will look better in the morning. And I thought, I don't think these papers are going to look any less horrific in the morning. But the advice felt good. It felt good to just sleep on this and deal with it tomorrow, because I just in the moment couldn't deal with it. And so I did that, and I woke up the next morning and I felt like, okay, if you can do this, if you can get up from having your, knees kicked out from under you and you can get up on that stage and you can still give that talk, you will know your own power and you will know that you can do anything in life. It was just that little voice, that gut voice, that whatever you want to call it, saying, if you can do this, you can do anything. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try. I don't know if I can do it at the last minute. I might, not be able to do it, but I'm making the decision that I'm going to do it. And I realized that there was a key thing that needed to happen here. So I of course called my mom, let her know what had happened, got the support from my inner circle. But I knew that I could not pretend that everything was going okay and that everything was fine and have what I needed internally to be able to give this talk, because I'm an introvert. Giving a speech is very stressful for me, and giving a TED Talk is like 100 times more stressful. So I realized that I actually needed to share with my community of people who were outside my inner circle what was going on with me, to be just honest about what had happened and how I was feeling and what I needed from people. And so, I put it out there publicly that, hey, this thing just happened. It doesn't feel good. I've made the decision that I want to go ahead with doing what I'd planned to do. And what I need from everybody is your support. I need you to send, positive vibes or prayers or whatever it is, send it my way, because I can't do this alone. There's no possible way I can do this and pretend like everything's just fine and I'm just stressed about the talk. And it was an incredible moment for so many reasons, because I made the decision to not let this knock me down and keep me down. And I made the decision not to pretend that things were other than they were. And it was just incredible to see over 100 people just come out of the woodwork, people I didn't even know were seeing my stuff, to support me and to send me good wishes and to tell me they believed I could do it. And in the aftermath of that dramatic moment, you have to deal with your reality. And so a couple of weeks later, after I'd come home from giving my talk, was my former husband's 40th birthday. And I was so sad because we'd been together since I was 19 years old and he was turning 40, and it was supposed to be a big thing that we would do together, and it was exciting. And I felt really sad, but I remember walking by the mirror in my bedroom, and even though I was feeling sad, there was this amazing sparkle in my eye, the sparkle of life, like there was somebody in there who knew that it was going to be okay and the future was going to be exciting. And I was so proud of how I had handled the situation, that I had gotten on stage and I had delivered the talk, and I had, done all of the adulting that I had to do in the ensuing weeks. And I just felt so much love for myself. And I found myself standing in front of that mirror with this outpouring of love coming out. And I was just talking to myself in the mirror, encouraging myself and saying all these beautiful words. And because I know that, if we don't record things, we forget them, I decided to post what I had said to myself on Facebook. And it had this amazing impact on people. They found those words so inspiring. One of my friends said that she wanted to print out the words and post them on her mirror for when she was having a bad day. And I just felt so good because I had uplifted people with my words. And so I decided to call this little note a note to self. It was a little note to self to remind myself that I'm good and that I'm loved and I'm doing well. And I just loved the response that I received so much that I decided to write another one the next day and the day after that. And at some point I went, I wonder if I wrote each one of these each day for a year. And so I did. And I ended up collecting them into a book. And it's this incredible little inspiring book. It's not little, it's actually almost 400 pages. But it's this incredible book about my year of heartbreak and healing. And it's entirely inspiring. Even when I go back and read it, I think, oh my goodness, this is so incredible that I wrote such beautiful little love notes to myself and so many encouragements, and that I believed in myself and that I cared for myself and that I tried new things and had new adventures, and I was right there backing myself up the whole time. And it's so amazing to have that little book out there now for people to enjoy and to use. We all have heartbreaks. Not all of them have to do with romance or divorce, but little disappointments in life, or we just need we need to be reminded that we're enough and that everything's going to be okay. And I love the way that my book that provides that for people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing the story. It's so powerful to not just how you turned it into not a positive, but you maintain that sort of sparkle in your eye, but just the fact that you can, and like I said, I'll link to the show notes, the YouTube video in the show notes. But to think that we watch people on TEDx stages and think that they on a whole new level, but behind the scenes there's so much more going on, that they're just humans like everyone else. And yeah, that was really powerful. If you had to kind of distill it down, what's the biggest thing that you'd want people to take from the book?
Ooh, the thing that I want people to take from the book is that you are stronger, braver, and more powerful than you think you are.
Awesome. Danielle, I do want to be mindful of the time, but before we wrap up, I've got some sort of quick fire questions. So just the first thing that comes to mind in a sentence or two is perfect. The first one is, what do you wish you'd been told in your 20s?
I wish that I had been told that if I felt enthusiasm for something, it was the right path.
Boom. What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
Oh my goodness. The greatest opportunity is for them to really take the things that they love and are interested in and apply them in different fields than people traditionally have. That opportunity is greater than ever.
Before I get on to the final question, Danielle, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you, not only for combining your interests and skills in a different, unique way and kind of reinventing yourself to do so, but also for transforming the sort of personal struggles that you went through into something empowering for other people. I think that says a lot about who you are as a person, and I want to thank you for that and for coming on today to share. And for people listening, where can they go to get in touch with you and to find out more about the PERS process and Note to Self and all the other work that you've got going on?
Yeah, I encourage you to check out my website. It's Danielle-Watson.com. If you want to check out the book, Dear Self, I Love You, Keep Going. It is on Amazon. You just go to amazon.com/author/Danielle Watson. And, find me on Twitter. I'm at Danielle Daily TV, as well as on Instagram at __ Danielle Daily. And of course, Facebook at the Danielle Daily.
Cool. I'll link that all up in the show notes. Danielle, I've got one more question, and that is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
The one thing that you can do this week to start creating your own quarter life comeback is to sit down and really think about, what is it that you want to do with the rest of your life, and be really honest about it. Don't worry about, whether it makes sense or whether it's the right thing. Just get honest with yourself. Don't worry about how you're going to make it happen, but make it clear to yourself what it is that you do want to experience.
I love it. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you, Brian.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a big thanks once again to Danielle for coming on and sharing her really cool story. I think it's so cool how she combined her traditional education in archaeology with her personal interests to create something that's quite frankly never been done before. If you liked this episode and you think your friends could benefit from it, please share it around on social media and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know your biggest takeaways. For me, it's the fact that we can do something new. We don't have to be stuck doing things that have always been done. And, it's up to us to kind of get creative and think outside the box a little bit. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/050. But until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.